It was just after 11:30 at night, and I'd already been driving for close to 4 hours across eastern Nevada after spending the day visiting a friend. If you've never driven through that part of the country, it's almost impossible to explain just how isolated it feels. There are stretches where you can go 20 or 30 minutes without seeing another set of headlights, another gas station, or even a house. It's just miles of empty desert, rolling black hills, and a 2-lane highway that seems to disappear into darkness. I wasn't in any rush. I was probably doing 5 or 6 miles over the speed limit at most, just trying to make it home before I got too tired. So when I saw red and blue lights suddenly flare up in my rear-view mirror, I figured I'd simply gotten unlucky. I slowed down, pulled onto the gravel shoulder, shifted into park, and rolled my driver's window halfway down. About 20 feet behind me, the patrol SUV came to a stop. At first, nothing about the situation seemed unusual. The officer took his time getting out of the vehicle, carrying a flashlight in one hand. He was wearing what looked like a standard dark police uniform with a campaign hat. And from that distance, there wasn't anything obviously wrong. Instead of approaching my driver's side, though, he walked around to the passenger side. I'd heard before that some officers prefer doing that on highways for safety, so I didn't think much of it. He swept his flashlight across my dashboard and into the front seats. But oddly enough, he barely looked directly at me or inside the vehicle. He simply said, "Evening." I answered with a quick, "Hey." Then he asked, "You know why I stopped you?" I admitted I was probably speeding, and he nodded slowly before asking for my license and registration. I handed both over, expecting the usual routine, but instead of carefully checking my information, he glanced at my driver's license for maybe 2 seconds before folding it into his hand without really examining it. "You headed home?" he asked. I told him I was. "Long drive?" he followed up. "Pretty much," I replied. He didn't respond after that. He just stood there, silently staring at me. He wasn't glaring or acting aggressive. It felt more like he was studying me, almost sizing me up. Then he smiled. "You traveling alone?" That question made me uncomfortable for reasons I couldn't explain. "Yeah." He shined the flashlight toward the back seat. "No girlfriend?" "No." "Huh." Another awkward silence followed before he finally said, "Sit tight," and walked back toward his SUV. I watched him through my mirrors as he climbed inside. At first, everything still seemed normal, but after a minute, something started bothering me. Every time I'd ever been pulled over before, the officer would sit in the patrol car typing information into the computer or running my license. This guy wasn't doing that. The emergency lights continued flashing, and I could see him moving around inside. But it didn't look like someone using a computer. It looked more like he was searching through something, or simply sitting there watching. 3 minutes passed, then 5. I picked up my phone and saw I had a single bar of service. I texted my brother anyway. "Got pulled over. Highway 50. Officer taking forever." The message never went through. Eventually, the officer got back out, but instead of returning my documents, he came straight to my driver's window and leaned down slightly. "You ever been arrested?" he asked. "No." "You sure?" "Yeah." He looked at me carefully before saying, "You seem nervous." I couldn't help but laugh a little. "I mean, I'm getting pulled over." He chuckled too. "Fair enough." Then instead of talking about speeding or explaining the stop, he asked what I did for work. I told him. He smiled again and asked if it paid well. The conversation felt bizarre. It sounded less like a traffic stop and more like awkward small talk with a stranger. Finally, he asked if I had anything illegal in the vehicle. I told him no. Then came the question I expected. "Mind if I search it?" I knew I had the right to refuse, so I politely told him I'd rather not. Surprisingly, he didn't argue or threaten me. He actually smiled even wider and said, "That's your right." Then he simply stood beside my door, silently looking into my car for what felt like forever. After nearly half a minute of uncomfortable silence, he finally said, "Step out for me." That caught me completely off guard. I asked if I was being detained. Instead of answering, he tilted his head slightly and repeated, "I said, step out." There was something about the way he said it that immediately felt wrong. It wasn't the words themselves. It was the delivery. It sounded rehearsed, almost like someone pretending to sound authoritative instead of someone who naturally had authority. Still, I didn't want to escalate the situation, so I got out. Standing on the shoulder, the desert somehow felt even quieter than it had inside the car. There wasn't any wind, just complete stillness, broken only by faint insects somewhere out in the darkness. The officer slowly walked around me once, but never frisked me or asked me to put my hands anywhere. Then he looked toward my trunk and simply said, "Pop it." I did. He walked over, looked inside for maybe 5 seconds, never touched a single item, then shut the trunk himself and came back. Opened the back seat. I hesitated. "Why?" For the first time his expression changed. He looked mildly irritated. "Just do it." I unlocked the rear door. He leaned inside with his flashlight, but again, didn't actually search anything. He didn't lift bags, check beneath seats, or move a single object. He just looked. It almost felt like he wasn't searching for evidence at all. It felt like he wanted to know if another person was hiding inside. After closing the door, he asked, "You carrying cash?" I admitted I had a couple $100. "Mind showing me?" At that point, every instinct I had was screaming that something wasn't right. There had still been no explanation for the stop. No speeding ticket. No mention of radar. No paperwork. Just increasingly personal questions about whether I was alone, how much money I had, and what was inside my vehicle. I told him I'd rather not. He stared at me silently for several seconds before asking if I had any weapons. I said no. Then everything changed when a semi-truck appeared on the horizon. Its headlights were visible from miles away across the flat desert. As it approached, I noticed the officer watching it closely. The truck thundered past us without slowing down, rocking both vehicles with its wind. The second its taillights disappeared into the darkness, the officer let out an irritated sigh. His entire posture changed, almost like we'd just lost an opportunity. "You can get back in the car," he said. I thought the encounter was finally over, but once I sat down, he leaned through my open window again and casually said, "It's safer if you follow me to the station." I frowned. "What station?" "Nearest post." "I thought you were writing me a ticket." "We'll handle it there." I immediately told him I'd rather do everything right here. His smile disappeared. "You don't have a choice." That was when I really started paying attention to the patrol SUV parked behind me. Something looked off. There wasn't any visible unit number on the rear quarter panel. Maybe some departments didn't use them, but the reflective decals looked unusually cheap, almost like someone had applied vinyl stickers themselves. One edge near the back door was even peeling slightly. The roof light bar looked authentic, but the rest of the markings suddenly reminded me of someone recreating a police vehicle from memory instead of using an actual department vehicle. I decided to ask a simple question. "Which department are you with?" Without hesitation, he answered, "State Patrol." The response came so quickly that it sounded automatic. "What State Patrol?" I asked. He blinked for a second before saying, "Nevada." Then he corrected himself awkwardly. I mean, highway patrol. That tiny mistake immediately sent chills through me. Any legitimate Nevada highway patrol officer would have introduced himself that way from the beginning. I asked if I could see his badge. His face tightened. You questioning my authority? No. Before I could finish, he interrupted me. Get in your vehicle. I got back inside, mostly because I wanted the locked doors between us. The second I closed the door, I quietly hit the lock button. I don't think he heard it. He started walking back toward his SUV, but instead of getting inside, he stopped halfway, turned around, and just stood there, staring directly at me. He didn't use a radio. He didn't write anything. He simply watched me. Something inside me finally snapped. I started the engine. The moment he heard it, he turned and began walking back toward my car with quick, determined steps. He knocked hard on the driver's window. Roll it down. I lowered it about an inch. What? I told you to wait. I thought I was following you. You'll follow when I tell you. Then he reached for the driver's door handle. It was locked. He pulled on it once before looking directly at me. That was the exact moment I stopped believing there was any chance he was a real police officer. Everything about the encounter suddenly made sense. He wasn't interested in writing a ticket. He wanted me outside that car. I rolled the window back up. He knocked even harder. I shifted into drive. He stepped directly in front of my headlights and held one hand up as if ordering me to stop. Instead, I steered around him just enough to get back onto the highway. I wasn't flooring it. I simply left. I fully expected him to jump back into the SUV and chase me immediately. Instead, nothing happened. In my rearview mirror, the emergency lights stayed flashing, but the SUV never moved. About a mile later, another set of headlights appeared behind me, and for 10 terrifying seconds I was convinced it was him. It turned out to be a pickup truck. I stayed behind that truck for nearly 30 miles because I couldn't stand the thought of driving alone anymore. Eventually, I reached an all-night gas station, and I've never been happier to see fluorescent lights and other people. There were 2 customers inside along with the cashier. I walked in and immediately told them everything that had happened. The cashier listened carefully before asking, "What did the car look like?" I described the white vehicle with the dark stripe and roof lights. He got quiet, then asked, "Did it have push bars on the front?" I told him it did. He looked over at another customer, who slowly nodded. Apparently, truck drivers had been talking for months about someone impersonating law enforcement somewhere along Highway 50. But nobody had solid proof, so most people dismissed the stories as rumors. The cashier insisted I call the county sheriff's office immediately. About 40 minutes later, a real deputy arrived. The first question he asked surprised me. Did the vehicle say highway patrol or state patrol? I told him both, explaining how the man had corrected himself. The deputy immediately wrote that down. Then he asked something that made my stomach sink. Did he ever actually tell you why he stopped you? I thought back through the entire encounter and realized the answer was no. Not once had he mentioned how fast I was going, whether he'd used radar or what traffic law I'd supposedly violated. Every question had been about me, where I lived, whether I was alone, how much cash I carried, what was inside my vehicle, and whether I'd follow him somewhere else. The deputy took my statement, thanked me, and said they'd investigate. A few weeks later, he called to let me know they still hadn't caught anyone. But another driver had reported an almost identical encounter involving what sounded like the same fake patrol SUV. The same strange questions, and the same request to follow him to another location. To this day, I have no idea what would have happened if I'd agreed. Maybe it would have ended in a robbery, Maybe something far worse. Maybe he would have backed off the moment another vehicle appeared, just like he did with the semi. I'll never know. What still bothers me isn't the fake uniform or even the fake police SUV. It's how unbelievably close the whole thing came to feeling like a perfectly ordinary traffic stop. If his uniform had been just a little more convincing, if I'd been a little more exhausted after that long drive, or if that semi hadn't happened to pass by when it did, I honestly believe I would have followed him.